Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Chantel Bekwe. I'm the Alumni Coordinator at the U.S. Embassy, Ghana. For today's session, we'll start off with the welcome remarks from our Cultural Affairs Officer, Lanis Broker, and proceed to the training session, which will be done by Nicole Gotthelf. There will be a dedicated Q&A session. After the presentation, we encourage all participants to use the Q&A option and not the chat option. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel. I'll now like to hand over to Lanis Bruker to give us the welcome remarks and then introduce our trainer. Thank you.
Thank you, Chantel. Good afternoon and welcome to all of you, especially our alumni of our U.S. government exchange programs, and to my colleagues both here in Ghana as well as in Washington. I am delighted to see so many of you joining today or listening online later for this very special workshop. I hope that you will agree that there are many benefits to participating in our official exchange programs, and programs like this, these types of engagements must be at the top of that list because this is something you're not going to get in very many other places or opportunities. The other benefit is the ability to apply for different grants. And one of the key parts of applying for a grant is not just your idea, it's not just your ability or capacity to carry out the grant, but it's actually at the very beginning when you are writing that proposal. We receive proposals for all kinds of programs, but if you can't articulate that at the very beginning and go through all of the steps that you're going to be talking about today, then you're not going to be as successful in actually getting those grants. So that is a really important reason that we're here today. And we're just so thankful to Nicole and to everybody who's been instrumental in putting this on together today. I also wanted just to reaffirm the U.S. Embassy in Ghana's commitment to support all of you as alumni in both your personal and your professional growth through different initiatives like this. When you go on your program or you participate in your exchange program here in Ghana, at the end of that, you know that we always say that's just the beginning of the relationship and not the end of it. It's through these types of initiatives and training that we continue that relationship. And we hope that you'll be continuing to apply for different programs, whether that's here at the U.S. Embassy Small Grant Program or for some of the ECA alumni grants. If you have any questions after this session, I know that you're going to have lots of opportunities to engage with Chantal. She is your main point of contact, but we will make sure you have those other resources and options as well. Today, I hope that you will participate actively, take full advantage of this opportunity to really gain and sharpen those skills. I know many of you already have good skills on those, but I know that you're going to learn something special from her. So with that, I am very honored to welcome and introduce our guest speaker today. Nicole has over 40 years nonprofit leadership experience in organizations furthering the missions of social change and economic justice, international development, land use and environmental conservation, arts and culture. She has successful experience in facilitating organizational strategic planning process and developing strategy for implementing fundraising and communication plans that increase funding and visibility of organizations. As a consultant, Nicole has worked with both international and U.S. clients. She has taught nonprofit management practices, strategic communications, fundraising techniques, event management, and proposal writing techniques. Currently, she is the Director of Grants and Individual Giving at Tapestry 360 Health, where she is responsible for seeking and managing government grants and for individual giving. With that kind of a resume, I think that we could probably use her for quite a few of these types of talks. But for today, I am very delighted to hand it over to her to specifically talk about how to write winning proposals, tips for getting grants and business opportunities. And with that, thank you so much, Nicole. Have an excellent workshop.
Well, thank you, Lanis, and thank you, Chantal, and thanks everybody at the U.S. Embassy for inviting me to come speak to you. I am really pleased to do this again. I've done it in various different places. So I'm just going to give you a little welcome, a little bit background about myself, review the agenda, and then get on with the program. So with that, I'm going to hopefully move my, there we go. I'm just going to welcome you from the United States. This is the state capitol when President Obama was inaugurated. And the kind of work that you do is that you are committed citizens. So I love this quote from Margaret Mead: "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that has. And I know that you do a lot of work in your local communities, and we're going to talk about how you can get funded with that. So my background is that I was born in New York City. I graduated from the Lycée Français de New York, and somehow I winded up in Wisconsin, where I went to Beloit College and the University of Wisconsin-Madison for grad school. While at Beloit, I studied in Peru, Nicaragua, and Costa Rica. And as Lenise said, I have worked over 40 years focusing on social change, economic development, social justice, and many other topics. I've done a lot of grant writing. I've also given out a lot of grants. I've been lucky to be with an organization that gave very small grants for little nonprofits, as well as serving on the city council in Madison, Wisconsin, where various different committees gave out money for housing, for parks, recreation. So I've been on both sides of the grant writing. So as small as giving out $500 to $1 million, as well as writing grants from 2,000 to 2 million, and managing some grants that have been over $10 million at my particular agency. Through the State Department, I've been able to go into and visit people in Chad, Uruguay, Trinidad, and Tobago, Grenada, where I have taught fundraising, various different kinds of fundraising. And I've also done some local fundraising with African groups up in Madison, Wisconsin, the African Development, the Center for African Center for Community Development, that works with immigrants and refugees from Africa and bringing them to feel welcome in Madison, Wisconsin. I recently did that. Currently, I do fundraising for Tapestry 360 Health in Chicago, and that is a community health center that has 16 clinics, both in the schools and freestanding, as well as with mental health. And this is the location, our largest center there in Rogers Park in Chicago. So our objective today is how to write effective proposals. I want to leave you with ways that you can get winning proposals accepted, and that they are well written. So we're going to talk about that. And then once you are so lucky to get a grant, how to manage them, because that is just as important as receiving the funds, because you want to manage them well so that you can continue to get funding. So Chantal had sent me some questions, so I'm going to do some background about grant funding and then talk about how to write some grants. There's different kinds of grant funding. There's program development support. So that is, you have a specific problem or something that you want to work on, whether it is clean water, addressing domestic violence, whether it's about having an arts program in a school. That is a specific program development, and that's what you're looking for support. So that's what you're going to write. It's going to be very focused. It's going to be telling people what you're going to do about that project or program. Then there's the general operating support, which all nonprofits, at least here in the United States, want. It's general operating money. You say, this is what we do as an organization. This is what we want to do as an organization. And we need that for administrative costs. We need it for keeping our doors open. And there are agencies that give you funding that is, here's the funding, you manage it, you spend it the way you want to spend it on operating your organization. So it's the most flexible of fundraising and the hardest to get support that way, just general operating. Usually the best way to get general operating is get through individual giving, but that's another subject. Now, if you were building a school or renovating your building, you would go for capital funding support. And that's very specific, it's very time related. A capital campaign many times starts way before you even announce it, so that, for example, I worked in Madison to help build a botanical garden, a conservatory, Oak Brook Botanical Garden, Oak Brook Botanical Gardens. And we knew that it was going to cost $5 million. So we did silent fundraising in advance, trying to get funding so that we had half the money before we applied for any grants and announced it. And then we worked to raise money through grant making, through individual giving, special events. But the project was very time specific, with the outcome of a beautiful building that brings so many people to Madison, Wisconsin. Now, there are research grants, and those are for people doing research, whether it's about HIV, whether it's about COVID, for example, whether it's about things up in NASA. These are different kinds of grants that you can get to do research. And they also have they're more complicated, because you might be had to test things, you might have to work with experiments, and you have to justify all that. But those are another source of funding. Then in-kind donations are grants that are, for example, you're building a school and you need a blackboard and you need chairs and you need items. You can get people to donate those kind of donations, and that's called in-kind grants. And then the last type of grant is a matching grant. As I said, I helped raise money for Oak Brook Botanical Gardens for the conservatory. And when we were just about $1 million more that we needed, we had got funding from the Kresge Foundation in Michigan that said, okay, we will match dollar for dollar if you raise this amount of money. And so that's a matching grant. And those usually come in later in a project, mostly in capital funding projects, but they can be used for other grants opportunities. And then where are the sources of grant funding? Now, there's private foundations. You've probably heard of the MacArthur Foundation. You've probably heard about Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. These are some of private foundations that do global international funding. There are family foundations that are set up by families, as it says, that might be smaller portfolios, and they give on a specific topic because it's in honor of somebody or about a disease, and it might be very focused. It might be religiously related. It might be site specific. It might be, their love of fishing, and so they're going to fund fishing. So those are family foundations. They're smaller. They're harder to crack. Many times they don't put out a request for proposal. You have to find them and nurture them, but they are sources of funding. Now, most of the funding that that you're probably aware of, because you work with the State Department here, is the government grants. And you have federal grants, you have state grants, and you have local grants. And I actually work on all these different kind of grants, and they're, have very different systems of writing the grant, putting in the information, but they all are opportunities for you. And then corporations. Corporations have granting programs. Some are grants like private foundations. They set up a grant program. Some are out of their marketing department. And so you have to look at corporations in a little bit of a different way, because you have to find, where do you meet where they want to put their investments? What do you have in common with those corporations? How would they benefit their target audience with your target audience? So you have to understand, just because they have opportunities there, that they're wealthy, that they have money, doesn't mean they're going to give to your project. You have to find what their guidelines are, because many of them do have guidelines. You have to understand that they don't fund in every places. They might just fund in where their location of their corporation is, or for example, they're a lot of corporate money out of Minnesota, and they only give to Minnesota. There are corporations like railroads that give where they have offices along that railroad track. So those are things you need to look at when you're looking at corporate support. So I've given you a background on what kind of funding there is, how you can approach this, how you think about it, what type of foundations you might look at. But really what you need to do is to understand in researching your prospects, because you have to do that. You have to research, you have to understand what the organization is looking for, what the funder is looking for. So you have to understand your own organizational needs in terms of its challenges, its issues, what kind of projects that need financial support. So you have to understand really how you are going to explain what you do, what your needs are in terms of writing that proposal. You have to define the goals and objectives that you are proposing for that project. So you really have to understand, are they these goals and objectives, are they attainable? Can you express them, that you're going to say, we're going to just do this, and this is how many people we're going to serve? Really thinking about overall how to define the goals and objectives of your proposed project. And then once you know what you're doing, you want to identify funding sources whose priorities align with your mission. I like to give an example. When Oprah lived in Chicago, everybody wanted money from Oprah. Oh, Oprah can, excuse me, Oprah, she has a lot of money, so she wants to give it to everybody. Well, that's not true. She definitely had ideas of where she wanted to give her money. She wanted to give it to girls. She wanted to give it to education. So so if your organization didn't meet that criteria, that's not something she was going to fund. But everybody would say, well, she's a source of funding. Yes, but you have to know what her priorities are. So that's the same with any funding sources. Do they have the same priority as your mission? Because if they don't, they're just going to throw out your application. And then you have to do research. You have to look at funding sources using databases, using grant directories, funding websites. There's a lot of funding out there for Africa. Besides the embassy, US is one of the biggest funders in Africa, but there's a lot of different nonprofits that might be, or funders that would be interested in, because if you meet the same priorities. So there are groups that are dealing with climate, there are groups that are dealing with health, there's groups that are dealing with domestic violence. So you look at that and see how you match in that way. And I can tell you, by just Googling, you will find a lot of opportunities. But again, you have to research to see the priorities of those organizations. You need to stay informed. Once you've identified groups, you should know when they're putting out requests for proposals. You should be really looking at timelines. You should be keeping a calendar of, there are possibilities of funding in the future. Like this, we get notices. Recently, we got a notice from the CDC that they were going to forecast a grant in March of 2025. So it's now on our radar and in our calendar to make sure we see when they put out that request for proposal. Excuse me. Because sometimes they change that. I'm still waiting on a request for proposal from this Department of health and here in Illinois, usually that should come out in March, and it still hasn't come out. So you just need to, find out, keep informed, connect with your program officer or the person in charge in case there's any changes, just so you know what's going on with that. You want to network. It is important to be out there. It's important for funders to see you. It's important for other people to know. So I don't know how it all works in Ghana. I've never been, but I'm sure there's events where nonprofits get together. I'm sure there's things that the embassy might put on. These are things that you should go to, because once you get to know some of the funders, they know who you are, and you're not, they might already know what you do and, might be interested, or they might see something that might pertain to your organizations, and they would say, hey, I saw something and you might want to apply for that. So you need to network. And I can't stress this enough, but you have to review the guidelines and requirements. When you are reading these requests for proposals or these notice of funding opportunities, you have to see, do you meet these guidelines? There's no reason to apply for something that you don't meet the guidelines. I recently sent out a request for proposal to some colleagues, and I said, oh, I think this fits our mission. But they were concerned that it was overall a nationwide application, and they didn't think we were competitive enough based on the guidelines. So you really need to look at those guidelines to understand what the requirements are. Do you need to have letters of support? Do you have to have your board approve of this? Do you have to have a certain type of person working on this project? Do you, are you a nonprofit? Really detail things in terms of requirements. And there's some requirements of just putting in the certain kind of attachments that they required. So do you have an audit? Do you have everything that they're going to ask you to put in the proposal so that you are successful in getting this grant? Again, does your proposal fit? Is it going to fit this agency's, this funder's mission? Are they going to invest in you? Is there a partnership there? It's something that is really important, and I can't stress that enough. Your organizational capacity to manage the grant. So you get the money, can you manage it? Do you have enough people to manage the programmatic work as well as the financial work? Do you have someone who's going to look at the accounting and maintain the use of the money? Do you have a bank account to put the money in? Do you have all the things necessary to manage the grant in terms of receiving the funding, is setting up the systems? That's very important also. And in terms of your research, you want to manage a funding opportunity timeline. So you can do research, you can see, okay, there's 10 potential sources of funding. Now, when are those grants due? A lot of them, for like recently, a lot of the state of Illinois grants are all due at the same time. They're all due, say, May 15th, because they're going to fund you on July 1st. So there's a specific timeline. Can you write that many grants at one time? Do you have enough people to do that? Keep managing that timeline is really important. Managing, once you start writing it and you know the due date of that proposal, can you get it in a couple of days early? Do not get it in 2 minutes before the deadline. Really, you want to manage your timeline really carefully, but that's really important in terms of researching your prospect, understanding how can you get this grant done in a timely fashion? Can you do that? So I am going to take a water break here. And then I am going to talk about key elements to write a winning proposal. And I think I've said some of this before, but I really want to let you know. You have to really understand the request for proposal, or the NOFA, which is the Notice of Funding Opportunities. I know you have opportunities to apply through grants.gov for some of the grants out of the US Embassy. And they really do have specific guidelines. And you really need to understand that. If they say 50 pages, they mean 50 pages. I once submitted an application to the federal government for school-based health center, and we needed to put in the lease. Well, the lease was 79 pages. And I was 2 pages over the amount of pages allowed, and therefore our proposal was kicked out. So now when I need to put in the lease as an attachment, I only put the front page and the signed document and say, you can get the complete lease if this is funded or if you need it for the funding process, so that I don't go over those limits. You need to understand how they want it organized. You have to understand if they say 3 pages, they mean 3 pages. Is it a proposal? If the request for proposal says, put in a letter of inquiry first, you do that, and then you wait till they invite you to put in the application, and then you read again the request for proposal. It's really important to understand the outline of the grant and how they want you to write the proposal. Many times what I do is I take their outline and create that as a template for writing the proposal, from the abstract to the conclusion and to the budget summary, so that I have their words there and I know how they're going to rate these applications. So it's really important. In a training I took with this grants.gov, they say you can use the words that the funder are using. So use some of their words too. You don't have to create new words in writing that proposal. Use the outline, but really understand it and meet the requirements of the proposal. And you want to be successful, you want to make sure your mission aligns with the purpose of the grantor's priorities. So you don't want to do that, apply if it's not worth your effort, because if you don't align, you're losing out in the competition. So you want to have a strong proposal that is competitive, that meets the purpose of the grantor. Your proposal needs to be clear and concise. You need to write simple sentences, not run-on sentences. You need to proofread. You make sure you don't have any typos. My brother writes grants to NASA, and he asks me a lot of time to proofread his proposals. I understand nothing about what he does, except I know he works on pulsars. So what am I looking for? Words that I know. If there's a lot of acronyms, are they spelled the same way? Are they all capitalized? Are they all not capitalized? Are they hyphenated? These are little things that, reviewers might say, well, this is not clear. They spelled it different ways. So just know that you need to be clear and concise. You have to make sure all the words are grammatically correct, and you need to proofread. And I'm going to say that a couple of times, proofread. Then the other very important thing is that your budget needs to align with the project narrative and a work plan. In talking to funders, this is one that they talk about a lot. They go, you said you're going to hire 10 people, but you have a budget that only carries for 2 people. You say you're going to do this and you don't have money for supplies or travel. So when doing that, and I know for federal grants, they will ask you for a detailed narrative for your budget. They will want to know what personnel you're going to be on there, what's their justification to be on there. So you're going to say, I'm going to hire these many employees. This is their salary. They're going to work on it about this amount of time, and you justify that. But it does have to align with your project narrative and work plan. Now also your timeline and goals and objectives have to be realistic. You have to know how long is it going to take to do the project, and can you get it on time? If you have a 12-month project and you need to hire somebody right away, do you have that system in place already so the person starts within a month of the application? Or do you already have staff that are going to work on it and while you hire somebody? You have to, and at the conclusion of your grant funding period, will you be able to complete everything that you're going to say you're going to do? Is it realistic? So those are really important in writing the grant and the key elements there. Then in terms of attachments, read out of the NOFO or the request for proposal what kind of attachments should be there. There should be, usually they ask for proof that you're a nonprofit. They also ask if you are, who are the key contacts, and maybe they want their bios. Maybe they want something more specific about them. You want to include a timeline about that. They might ask for a timeline. They might ask for a specific work plan or a logic model. So these are things that are typically asked as attachments, as well as letters of support. But again, going back to my problem where I attached a lease, do not go over the required amount of the page limitation. So in a federal grant, I can tell you that they will tell you what forms are not counted to the page numbers and what forms will be counted. So like a lease, like a letters of support. So you have to determine how many letters of support. We write a big grant every 3 years and for our basic funding at Tapestry. And we try to get all our partners to say we're wonderful and they work with us. And we might have 15 to 30 letters of support. And so we have to make sure that it's all within the page limitation of that grant proposal, which I believe is 80 pages. You want to follow the instruction for style and content. As I said, you want, if they say we want Calibre, Arial, or Times Roman as the font, you have to do that. Don't do any font that they don't want to do. You might prefer a certain font over another font. Like I don't like Times Roman, so I always do Arial or Calibre if that's required. If they say it's double spaced or single space, you need to do that also. If they say they want a table of contents with a bibliography, you need to provide that. If they say you can do footnotes and they're like, this is the way we want to do the footnotes, that's important too. So you have to really follow those instructions for style and content. And I know on federal government, there's a very much a manual that tells you that kind of detailed information. Maybe for a smaller grant, it's just, just write me a 3-page proposal that just says your needs, what you're going to do, how much you want, and that's fine. But really be clear what style and content. Back in the day, we would have to write grants and we would have to make 5 copies and deliver them to the funder who would put out a box by their door. Or when I worked for a nonprofit, we did that. We had a grant funding program and people brought in their grants and they had to have X amount of copies because we didn't want to copy the grants. Now with digital grant making, you don't have to do that. Although recently I had to bring 5 copies to a funder on the hottest day of the year. So really, really read those instructions of what they're doing. 1, those proofreading. Again, like I said, that's really important. And just even proofreading for a NASA grant, which I know nothing about, was important for my brother, just because you need to have another pair of eyes. You could also do this trick where you ask somebody who knows nothing about your program, maybe a relative, to read your proposal to see if they understand it. Because many times reviewers are generalists and they don't know the specific of your topic. They understand the topic, but they don't know every little detail. So if you can get your mother or your aunt or your cousin to understand this proposal, that's a good thing. But also keep in mind your timeline of getting in the grant on a timely fashion, which is the last point here. You need to be on time. You need to put it in when they say you should put it in, not afterwards, because you won't get funded. I'm not a minute afterwards. You definitely should try to get it at least 3 days in advance. I always try to have a proposal done a week in advance, but I work with a whole team, and that doesn't always happen. And so sometimes we are there at the last minute, and I can tell you it's nail biting. And I can also tell you that sometimes we were doing a very big grant for the NIH, National Institute of Health, and they had some minor glitches after a certain time when the grant was due, proposal was due. Fortunately, I got mine in before the glitches, but I didn't get a notice as they said I would get. And so I had to call up to make sure it went through, because I didn't get that confirmation number. So when you do put in a proposal, you want to make sure you get the confirmation number and that they say they have received it, so that you have a sense about that. So you don't want to think, oh, well, I put it in, it's going to happen. No, you should have some kind of confirmation that they have received that proposal. Now, proposal writing is about communication. You're asking people to invest in your organization. So you have to communicate well. You have to really project your project that people want to hear this story that you're going to tell about your issue, your problem, your agency, and what you're going to do to alleviate, whether it's how you're going to deal with domestic violence, how you're going to bring in more water to your community, how are you going to make something more sanitary. But whatever the issue you are dealing with, you want to have good communications in telling that story to the funder. So I'm going to go over an outline of a grant proposal. Not all grant proposals are going to be like that. So in this digital age, there are many funders that have the same format that they use when you apply, and it's all on digital, and you fill in the forms, you fill in the information on the grant. For like when I do state grants, there's a real system. There's like 6 tabs on a digital form that I have to fill out, from just the organizational information that includes your website, to the budget, to whether or not I'm lobbying, all these little specific information about the risk. They're all specific to that proposal, but it's all the same for those state grants. So know the system you're using, make sure you understand what they want you to attach. For example, in some of these state grants, they want real narrative information to say, this person, Mary Jo, is going to do this work at this amount of time. And if I say it in the form, it has to match it in the little narrative. And sometimes when I'm playing with numbers, I don't go back and change things, and they'll say, you need to change this before we look at your proposal. So really look at the way the different forms are, but generally, this is an outline of a grant proposal. The summary page or the abstract is what you write the last, but we put it there on the top because that's there. In federal grant, sometimes there's a 2-tier process, and you put in the abstract and how much money and the timeline, and fill out the organizational information first. And once you do that, it opens up and you put in the whole application that has more of a narrative and a budget narrative. So in terms of organizational information, you should know your organization. You should really have a template of already what you have written about your organization. This is 2 to 3 paragraphs about the history of the organization, about your mission, where it's located, Do you have several different sites? Who's in charge? How big is your board? These are information they want to know. They want to know your mission, your values, and you need to do that succinctly. Once you have that, that should be something that you could always go back to, that you might have to tweak for a specific organization. If it's a foundation, it's a little bit different than a previous one, but you might want to say, pull out something that relates to their mission too. But it really is who you are. And again, be clear and concise. No run-on sentence here. This is easy to say. We serve, 28,000 people in 16 locations on the near north side of Chicago. That's what Tapestry 360 Health does. We provide comprehensive health for individuals in our service area. Just very clear about that. Then you want to talk about your problem, your needs description. You really want to realize that, as I said a little bit before, that the reviewer might not know everything about you or about that topic. So you really need to detail it to explain how that is. And in some grants, they will say, we want X amount of information. We only want 2,000 characters or 5,000 characters. So make sure you're writing that in that way. But you really need to say what the situation is, what the problem is, how this is affecting your community, and what you want to do to alleviate it. And then in the work plan or in specific activities or how you're going to respond, I think in federal grants, they'll say, what's the response? So you will go into the specific activities that you're going to do. Hopefully it really matches what you're saying in the problem statement. It relates to what you do as an organization, and you write that out in a narrative. Sometimes they want that in a work plan, that they want to say this. Sometimes they tell you, here's the 5 objectives you are going to work on. And so you say that, and you say what staff's going to work on it, what timeline. So maybe you're hiring something that's only going to take 3 months. Maybe after you hire somebody, you're going to do this social media plan, and that's going to take 9 months. So you really put those details. You talk about how you're going to evaluate that. And sometimes that is in a work plan. But you're really specific about the activities that you're going to do, that you're going to carry out. This is where you would say, we're going to reach X amount of people. This is how we're going to do it. And so you're really clear about that. Then you're going to really talk about the impact of those activities. What impact will it have on your community? And you could put that, some people ask for a logic model, which is really a graphic display of what you're going to do, of the goals, the objections, the actions, the outputs, the number of people you're going to meet, number of sessions you're going to have, and what is your long-term outcome. Are you going to decrease this activity by 10%? So this is where you put percentages in of an increase or decrease of what we're going to see that happens. But not everybody asks for a logic model. Sometimes the federal grants do ask for that, and it's an attachment. And sometimes they go to your page count. So you need to be really thinking about that. Another thing that I did not put here, but the other thing they might ask you is collaboration. Who are you going to collaborate to do this project? Are there people who you work with that are going to be part of these activities? So they're going to ask you about that. They want to know you are connected in the community and you're not doing this all by yourself, or maybe you are doing it all by yourself, but you're going to reach out to other people. They also want to know how you're going to evaluate this project. It's important to evaluate your project. Sometimes you can't do everything. You thought you were going to put in a management system that would help you know who your patients are, and all of a sudden it took much longer than what you thought it was going to take. So you didn't necessarily, so you're going to evaluate, why was that? How come it didn't work properly? Or you're going to say, this was a great success, and this is why it was a great success. But here are some of the challenges we had. So be honest in terms of looking at your proposal. It's really important to do that. It's really key on doing that. Now they're going to ask you about your sustainability. So you got funded. Can you maintain that? Do you want to do this forever? We got a 1-year grant to hire someone to do follow up to mammograms. And it was just 1 year. And the person was a fabulous staff person. And her boss said, how can we keep her? We want to keep her, but we don't have general operating money to keep her. So we went looking for other grants, and we were able to, and then we got refunded again. But we, really looking at that sustainability of the project. Can you keep it going? A lot of nonprofits during COVID got millions of dollars. They hired people, but they couldn't sustain it because 10 million from the federal government was not going to be replaced by private sector. So think about that sustainability. You want to make sure, I'm stressing this, I know, your budget aligns with the narrative and work plan. Really be careful there, because sometimes somebody said, well, we should just put this in the budget, and you're like, well, that doesn't relate to what we're doing. Oh, well, it doesn't matter. It does matter. So you really have to think about that, and we'll look at budgets. And budgeting and finance, really, really important in writing your grant. It should align with your project narrative. It should be realistic and engenders trust. It's not padded. It's really like you can see based on the project narrative, this is what these folks are going to do. It's clear. And you make sure you include everything you need to carry out that project, because sometimes people forget, oh, I need this money to do this, to keep the doors open. So it's really important to make sure you have all the expenses. Think about it, write it out. Maybe some of it is not an allowable cost, but at least, okay, I can get 90% of this project funded by this funder, and 10% of this money will come from our general operating money or from a donor. So that way we match. Just think about, and they would cover the monies for unallowable expenses. Your budget should include an income and expense and is within the award amount. So I noticed a couple of grants opportunities that are there for you. Some of them are for the embassy has $3 million to give, or $300,000 to give out, and they're doing grants between 5,000 and 100,000. So are they only going to give 3 grants out, and that's very competitive at 100,000, or are they going to make little grants? So think about that. You want to think about how much the award is and keep it in the required amount, and don't go over even a penny. So I just created a little sample budget. Oops. Okay. Sorry. This is just showing you how to do a budget. It's really simple. It's really small, but you have your income. You talk about where your contributions are. That's donations. If you earn incomes, if you sell t-shirts, or you have ticket sales, or you have events that bring in some earned income. And then you talk about your government support and your foundation support. And maybe you have money sitting in the bank and you're earning some interest. And so that's other support. So that's just a typical small income. And then for expenses, your total personnel for each person, you'll do a justification for that for federal grants. The fringes, I was very generous. I gave 25% fringes. That's your taxes, income for here in the United States, Social Security, benefits, what else? Various things that are part of the income taxation that I can't think of right now. Your travel, are you going to travel in state, out state, or is it allowable? I put 2,000 in. The supplies you're going to need. Supplies are anything 5,000 and below. So like a computer, if it's not over $5,000 is a supply. Do you need licenses for any of your employees to do the work that they do? That should be included in. Are you going to contract for somebody to come in and talk to you about something, or to provide a service that you can't do with the personnel, that's something a little extra, like you're putting on a fair and you're going to have somebody do that, or you're going to hire somebody to market your program or manage your social media? That's contractual. Are you going to do any training or education? Include that. And then if you are doing construction grant, which is totally different, but you have some construction costs, that can be in that proposal too. Also in a proposal, which I didn't do in this sample budget, and I know you can do on federal grants, they allow administrative support for indirect costs, and that you have to build it in. So, excuse me, so if they allow you 10%, this might be a less, the grand total of the direct cost has to be less so that it comes up to 60. So you just think about those things about doing budgeting. In a federal grant, they are going to ask you to explain each line item, and you're going to have this document. We're going to hire 10 people at this salary. You put in all that information, what time they're going to spend on it. So they want detailed information. If you're buying bus passes, if you're using lifts, if you're using you know, phone cards, things like that. They want to know the individual costs of most things. They want to know who you're going to contract and their hourly costs. Okay. So I said earned income is, like I said, if you have a gift shop, if you sell hats, if you do ticket sales, that's earned income. Contributed is donations from individuals. And then foundation and government support, Families Foundation, matching grants. In kind, you can put that down in your income statement. In the budget expenses, you want to put the personnel and fringes, and then all the other direct project expenses. Equipment and federal grants are 5,000 and above, and they want you to track that, and they'll ask for a report about that afterwards because they deal with depreciation and information about that. And then if you are so lucky that they say they will do indirect costs, that you can do that. Otherwise, you might have in your direct expenses how much you pay for rent, how much you pay for utilities, depending on the kind of grant you're applying for, you can do that. So what does a reviewer look for in a proposal? This was a question asked, sent to me by Chantal. So what is the problem the agency is addressing? Can they clearly understand what problem you are addressing? They want to know, are other people doing that? You know, are you working in collaboration with other people, or is this a one-off? And if it's something new, innovative, they want to know that. But if it's also something that other people deal with, how, you know, maybe it's a different way that dealing with climate change, that one group is doing it around this on water, another one's doing about pollution. So they want to understand what the problem and how you are addressing it, but also what others are addressing. You know, why do you want to apply for this? What prompted you to address this problem? Is this new to your mission, or have you seen things change that, given your mission, this is a problem you want to address? So they want to understand that also. And they want to know your mission and your agency. So be really clear about what you do and your goals, where you see. Do you have a 5-year plan? Do you have a strategic plan? They want to understand that. They understand your history, your mission, and where they see you going in the future. They also want to know how you are governed. Do you have a board of directors? Do you have chief development officer or chief executive officer, director, executive director, executive secretary, depends what titles people have. But they also want to know is that how long has the executive director been there? Have they been there forever? Are they the founder? And they've been there 30 years. Will they be leaving next year and retiring? They want to know those informations about how you are governed. They want to know about your board. Here in the United States, they want to know the board. They want to know their gender. They want to know their race. They want to know a lot of information, demographic information about our staff and our board in terms of how the organization is led, and they want to know key staff. And sometimes in the proposal, you'll have to write a paragraph on each staff person that are leading the organization. Now, what is the internal organization structure? They will probably ask you to give a organizational chart, so they can see the line of command. They want to know your other source of income. Where do you get the money? And they want to know, how long have you gotten it? Or maybe money's drying up and you need new sources of money. And they want to know what you're going to accomplish. They want to know how you will meet those objectives. And they want to know your strategies. So if you have a strategic plan, they want to know that. And they want to see that you have the capacity to carry out this proposed project. And then I can't stress this enough. Did you answer all the requirements as outlined in the RFP and the NOFO? Did you do everything they asked you? Is the proposal clear and concise? These are things they want to not see typos. They want to see a budget that matches. They want to know that you are carrying out all this information. So you wrote a great proposal. You got, $100,000 from the State Department. Now what are you going to do? You need to manage that grant. What we do in my office is that we have a kickoff meeting with all the staff that's going to be involved. That includes the finance person, the program person, myself, maybe one of the supervisors over the whole granting program. And we go over everything that's in the proposal, what it's going to fund, the purpose, the budget, the staff, who's responsible, and what kind of reports are going to be needed. And then we set up a calendar every quarter to go over the progress of that grant and making sure we're spending the funds, making sure the project is getting done, and so that we don't find out 9 months into the grant, money's not been spent, staff has not been hired. These are very important to carry out the grant requirements. So you have to have adequate staffing of the project. You can't have a project that's, all of a sudden doesn't have a staff, or maybe you're going to use volunteers, but you need to really have it staffed and those staff people need to keep you informed on a quarterly fashion. You have to do timely reporting. Some grants ask for monthly reports, and some of them are very specific. Some of them are data driven, some of them are all financial. Some of the grants that we get from the government are reimbursement grants. So every month we put in, this is the amount of staff people that worked on this grant. This is the amount of supplies we did. Here's the invoices. So you have to report that back. Very important. You can get dinged for future grants if you're not known for reporting on time. It's really important to maintain accurate records, financial and programmatic ones. You need to have an accounting system that carries out. Maybe you have 3 different kinds of grants, so you give them a code so you can follow that particular grant with that code, know where the staff is spending on it, and then coding that person to that grant. You need to know your programmatic. If you say you're going to do 5 events a year, maintain a log of all the events you did. How many people come? Maybe they want to know the demographics. So they want to know how many were women, how many were men, how many were over 65, how many were under 5. They want to know that. So and it could just be an Excel sheet for that programmatic information, but you should have it because you're going to be writing some narratives in reporting. And you need to have that demographic information, because if you say we're going to reach 15 more kids in over the next year and to help them understand their health needs, you want to show 15% increase from the last year. So you want to have that information. So you want to maintain those records. It's really important. On a quarterly basis, or maybe every half a year, you want to evaluate your accomplishments. So maybe some things are just, you said you're going to hire a bunch of students to do some trainings and it didn't come through. So do you pivot and do something different, or what do you do? So, but you want to evaluate that. You want to keep your funder informed of the activities and challenges and successes. They want to know if you're having you can't spend the money in one way, you might be able to do a line item transfer, or you might make an amendment to the grant. Just keeping them informed and being honest about the success or the challenges you might be having. Okay, grant writing mistakes. You're not organized. You didn't put in timeline. You didn't get all the materials in. I like to find out what all the attachments are and try to get them all in place first, and really read how they want the attachments put in. And so you really want to be organized. You didn't read the RFP and NOFO. You didn't say that it was 50 pages and you wrote an 80-page grant. You didn't want to do that. They wanted 3 pages, you wrote 5 pages. You didn't ask, you didn't provide the information they wanted, so you didn't read it carefully. Read it carefully. You should involve your board or staff leadership. Just don't go write nilly-willy grants because you see it. You want everybody in your organization a part of that grant making process. Even if they're not writing the grant, they want to know what's going on. They need to be part of that. And maybe you get a $500,000 grant and all of a sudden you can't use it. So, and you have to discuss why you can't use it, and the board of directors might have to make that decision. Not finding links to funders, being informed about the funders. You should keep yourself informed, knowing what they're doing. If they're making changes, that's really important. Not writing a clear and concise proposal. I can't stress that enough. In this age of AI, don't use AI. The reviewer can know that this is not a person writing it. If you need another word, look up the thesaurus or the dictionary. Do not use AI. I have people say, oh, just do AI. Well, no, because it doesn't tell the soul of the project. It doesn't tell who you are. And a big mistake, not following instructions. As I said, not allowing enough time for planning, writing, gathering the materials, and proofreading. All very important part of grant writing. Not getting letters of support of key stakeholders. You want to make sure you need, say, 5 letters from your top partners. Get those letters. You write out a template and send them, say, put this on your letterhead, write it your name, get it signed, put a little information about our relationship, and send it back to us by this time. And give yourself lots of time to do that. It's really worth it. And not keeping good financial records and programmatic records is another mistake also. Because if you don't know what you've done in the past and you can't provide this information, then your proposal won't be good. So you really need to look at that. So a successful grant writing, you've done the research, you really know who you are, you know who they are, you know how this would be a good marriage. Can you do this together? You really understand. You have to have stamina because it takes a long time. You might be up to midnight. You might be up for midnight for 3 days writing this grant. You might have people who said they would give you information. So it takes a lot of energy. So get that stamina. You have to be consistent. Really say who you are. Don't change what you're doing. Really be consistent in what you're doing. Be persistent, because you can write 10 proposals and only get 1 funded. But you persist because you have a good project and you know you will get that. I've written now 3 projects about behavioral health. 2 of them have not been funded. I know they were great proposals, but maybe the competition was there. I'm waiting to hear about the 3rd. cross your fingers for me. You have to practice humility. You have to really respect that this is not about you. This is about selling your organization and really doing a good job, and not every project's going to get funded. I did a project where the score was 95, but they really wanted rural. They want to give more to rural versus urban. So know that it's not you. It just has. Don't take it personally. It's frustrating, but don't take it personally. And just know the impact of all the good work you've done. It really makes a difference. And in that, I'm opening it up to questions and answers. Well, hopefully I could give you the answer.
Thank you, Nicole. That was an insightful presentation. Moving on to the question and answers. So our first question is, what are the key indicators to measure your probable success at a grant?
All of a sudden I got this pulled up, so I didn't hear what you said, Chantal. Say that again.
Okay. So the first question is, what are the key indicators to measure your probable success at a grant?
Ooh, very good question. Well, you should really look at where the type of grants that they are funding. You should see, is this, does your mission and their mission align? That's more probability is higher than if it doesn't. If they say if the competition is, say, there's 400 grants that are going to be awarded versus 215 versus 5, are you going to be the top 5? Is this a winning proposal that will get 100% or over 90%? Can you meet every description? Like, we just wrote a grant, and their priority is they want to start new things. So we already lost 5 points there. So really understanding their priority and the mission. And then you could say, this is new, it's 50%. We got funded last year, so that's going to be 80% to 100%.
The next question is, how do you evaluate your proposals for continuous improvement in the cases that funders do not provide feedback to applicants who are unsuccessful?
Oh, well, I would give it to maybe somebody who's in your field to read it, to see if, or to maybe there's somebody who did get funded, and maybe they could critique it and say, can we compare? There's nothing wrong to sharing information and learning from the people who are successful. I think that whole part of the networking, I know, some funders won't tell you anything, and it's very frustrating. But if they do, really learn from that. But I think having somebody else read it and say, did I miss the mark? What did I miss? So to get somebody else to evaluate it.
The next one is, regarding the outline of a successful grant proposal, at what points do you bring in your communications plan or strategy?
Well, I think you include your communication strategy as part of your proposal. You're not living in a vacuum, and in this digital age, everybody needs to know. So I would always include money for marketing in there, even if it's just going social media. Think about the cost of that. So do you need materials for flyers? Are you going to put on an event? Always include some communication money in that, even if you don't have a communication director, but you do spend money communicating. So think about, do you have to set up something? Do you have to pay for some things? Think about all the things you do in terms of communication, and really, in putting together your proposal, you should talk about how you're going to communicate what you are going to do. How are you going to outreach to the people that you're going to serve? How are you going to get there? That's all part of the communication strategy. So it should be part of your planning process.
The next one is, regarding the budget. Sometimes, by the time your grant is approved, inflation may have gone up. What's your advice in such situations?
Oh, I know that. We had a grant for we got a HRSA grant for COVID to do renovation and alterations. And oh my gosh, the cost of doing that, just getting the materials, have gone up so much. So you have to evaluate, maybe you have to cut something, maybe you won't do the floors and you have to do that, but you have to let the funder know and say, you know, due to inflation, we are not going to be doing that. Do we need to put in a, you know, do we have to put in a project change? Do we have to do that? Or we are not going to be able to do that at 100%. We're going to only do it at 90%. So figure out how you can do it within the budget. And you might have to go back to the funder and say, we're not going to be able to do all of it due to this. Or is there any, you know, do they have extra money because of that? So it can be both ways. You might have to make line item transfers of, okay, we need more money in this area versus that area. And you just make these decisions. You have to look at your budget that way.
Do startups have to do something extra to get a successful grant?
Say that again?
Do startups have to do something extra to win a grant?
That is a very good question. I think you look for organizations that are funders that are interested in startups, but you do have to be really clear about how you came about acknowledging that you are a new organization and you've taken on this topic or this area of concern and really want to do this. So you probably have to write a little bit more about your organization and how you got started and what are your strategic plans for the next 5 years. So they don't see you as a one, you know, this is going to happen this day, but they understand that your board and your staff are in for the long run. So you should have a good strategic plan, some kind of plan, a communication plan, and really show people, and also good letters of support. I think as a startup, you should have people vouch for you that, oh, this organization startup and they, you know, we used to do this, or they will be a complement to what we do. So I think those are the things to engage people to understand why they would be good to invest. When I was in the granting section, when I ran its nonprofit in Madison, we only gave out $500 to people, but that was to help them, many groups to do startups. And one group was a housing organization. They got $500 to hire a consultant to write a $1.5 million grant, and they received it. So even if it's small, it could lead to something big.
At what point in the proposal do you do your risk profiling and analysis?
Oh, good question. Well, at the state of Illinois, they have a whole section on risk and analysis. So they ask you all these questions. I don't have that in other grants that I've done. So they ask me the questions. So it's usually them asking you, but you, in your response, if you were going to say, these are the risks that we're taking in doing this project. So, and this is how we're going to deal with this. This is how we're analyzing. So it would be in the response area, or you could do it in the needs also, but I think it's more in the response. But there, in the state of Illinois, we have a whole risk assessment, and they're really looking at how long, you know, have there been any changes in leadership? So that's in your organizational. So saying, you know, our CEO's been there for 5 years, you know, some information about that. They're looking about your finances, you know, have you had a bad audit? They're asking you all these questions. Have you had turnover? So in my experiences that I'm being asked to ask that, almost like an attachment. But if you're going to say to the funder that we are an organization that you don't have to worry about the risk because we've had this kind of leadership, we've had this kind of funding, we've been able to do this information, you can put that in your organizational needs assessment, talking about your organization, or in the response.
Can two or more groups or organizations team up and rise for one grant?
Ooh, that's really good. They funders like that. Particularly if you complement or you might be the same. So I ran this nonprofit called Aid to Wisconsin organization in Madison, Wisconsin. We did social justice funding, and there was a group that was older than us, the Madison Sustaining Fund Foundation. We eventually said, we're doing the same work, and we merged, and we became one organization, and that has gone on for many years now. And just actually celebrated 50 years. But people like when groups come together. They like partnerships. They like collaboration. They think that's really good. What you need to be prepared for is who's managing the money. So will it be a joint grant where you're equal partners, or are you going to be one person's going to be the primary and the other one's going to be a sub-awardee? Like we've applied for some grants and we don't get funded, but our partner agency does. They will then come and sub-award us part of that grant to do some of the work that we said we were going to do in our own grant. So collaborations are really looked upon success. People like that a lot.
What will be your advice when a grant awarder is insisting on a certain individual to continue leading operations before they continue releasing funds when such an individual has decided to move on to a different agency?
Ooh, I've never had that. That's so interesting. Well, I think that's a funder problem because you can't keep people in the same job if they're ready to move on. They might say, I think you need to go talk to the funder. You should bring the person who's moving on. And maybe they're moving on because they got a better offer or something. And maybe you bring somebody who's going to be interim, that they meet the interim person. And then they talk to the board chair to understand how the process to replace that person's going to happen. And if the funder is not happy about that, I don't know what to say. I've never had that problem, but you can't force people to stay in the job when they know it's ready to go. So I think it's really meeting with the funder. Maybe it's the funder just knows this person and they need to get to know the next person. I've not had that situation.
Okay.
But it's just good. It's just really about good communicating and saying, you're not giving the money to the individual, you're giving the money to the organization. And we are going to be led by this great board of directors who's going to hire a new person. And maybe the old person's involved in hiring the new person. And, it can't be contingent on one person. You're not funding a person. This money is not yours. This money is the organization, and a whole group of people are doing the work.
Okay. Grants usually indicates maximum amounts they are able to fund. When budgeting, should you target meeting the maximum amount?
Why not? If you can, you have to be realistic. Like we just put in a grant that the max was 500,000. We didn't ask for 500,000. We couldn't spend all that money. If you can't spend all that money, doesn't mean that your grant is not good. It just means you're realistic. Like you're not padding it. Like we're only going to hire this amount of money. This is how much it's going to cost us. Yes, if they say, I notice a grant in your, it's 5,000 to 10,000. If you can do 10,000, if you know how you're going to spend that money, then by all means. But if it's just 9,500 and you can't figure out how you're going to spend $500 more, that's okay too. I don't think that's a ding. You're being realistic on how you're spending it.
Okay. Do some grants come with terms and conditions and possible sanctions for breach of contract?
Oh yeah, you got to read your contract. You got to read your contract. You have to know if you do something illegal. You have to know, they might say, a lot of the federal grants say you can't have alcohol in your office. You can't have people smoking. They tell you things that you're not supposed to do. you can't use your money this way. There's allowable and non-allowable costs. So if you're doing that, you really need to know that information. And if you don't carry out the grant, if you take that money and the director decides he's going to have a limo to take them to work back and forth, when you said the travel money was for people who needed bus passes, you're going to get dinged. Yeah, you have to make sure the money is really being spent the way they want you to spend the money. And if you're not carrying out the work, they can, it says that in the contract, what they'll do to you. Read that contract, it's really important.
Okay. Can you also go beyond the maximum amount and indicate that you'll be funding the remaining expenses?
So you have a project that costs $1 million and this funder only gives $500,000. So you write the grant with $500,000, and then you put in where you're going to get the other money to carry it out, and you show what those other expenses are. And so they understand that this is $1 million project. 500,000 is going to come from the embassy. 200,000 is going to come from MacArthur. 100,000 is come from Google, and 200,000 is going to come from donations that we're going to get through solicitation. So you just show them, here's the overall project, but this is what we're asking you to fund.
If your organization has never received any grants or donations, does this reduce your chance of winning a grant?
No, not necessarily. If you write a really good grant and you know what you're doing, you will get it. So the first time I ever worked on a grant, I was I think I was treasurer of the Bassett Neighborhood Association in Madison, Wisconsin, and we got a community development grant, very small grant to hire a person to do our neighborhood planning. And so the city, I came in and talked to the city controller, and he taught me how to do grant reporting and finances. And that was the first grant we ever got to do that work. And then it went on to do other work. So no, you can, even if it's your first time, you can get a grant. Don't let that scare you. You might have to write 10 grants before you get the first grant, but it might take a while. But just really make sure your marriage between your program and the grantor's program is strong. Why do they want to invest in you? And if you write a clear and concise and well-proofread application with a good budget, they will consider your proposal.
Can you recommend places or portals where organizations can put themselves up for potential collaborations and resource pooling for grant applications?
Ooh, that's a great question. I know there's an African grant-making network. I know there are groups that come together. I don't know if the UN hosts these things. I don't know if the embassy does, but there are groups for nonprofits like-minded and where you get together, going to conferences, and now that everything's done on Zoom, going to that and trying to be out there. Look at the topic that you are working on and see if there are ways to collaborate with other organizations. We here, I've only been with Tapestry 360 Health for 4 years. There's an association of federally qualified health centers that get together, try to be part of that. Sometimes we collaborate with our other organizations that are like us, doing work in different geographies, but we'll all work together. So I think just looking on the internet for that, and then also seeing what funders, if they host things. Does MacArthur host anything in Africa, and can you go there? Can you go to an event, or are they doing something like that? There's various different places to look for collaboration. Being part of, just being part of your own network of the topic that you work on.
In situations where your project is directed at serving the poor, for instance, providing mental health service for underserved communities at no fees, now sustainability may be a problem. Does this reduce one's chance at winning a grant?
I'm sorry, please say that again.
So in situations where your project is directed at is directed to the underserved communities at no fees, with that sustainability may be a problem. Does this reduce your chance of winning a grant?
No. If you explain why here we serve the uninsured, and that doesn't reduce us. That's what our mission is. The reason why we do this work is because people don't have the ability to pay for healthcare. So if your mission is to provide the underserved with free activities, somebody needs to help fund it, and that's not a negative. You just have to tell your story of why you do that, why it's important that they need to invest into your program so you can continue to do that. You can show why asking someone just to pay $1 can affect them. You need to just explain why this is your mission, and that the funding will really allow you to continue to do that work.
Are there specific strategies for alumni associations to win grants as against individual organizations?
Oh, I think there are. I mean, if you come together and write a grant together, I think that I have not worked. I mean, that's such a great question. I mean, I don't know how your alumni association works. I just know about my alumni, but that's more college. And so, but I think if you bring together why this is important, for example, the reason I'm doing this today instead of the day that you asked me to do is I'm going to a reunion of people that I went to study in Peru 50 years ago. And we collectively get together periodically as an alumni of that program. But we've never like asked for money. But if as long as you have the credentials to apply and meet that, I think you're okay. If the Alumni Association is a nonprofit, you can do that. If it's individuals, then you have to look at individual funding. And there are funding categories that give to individuals, not necessarily nonprofits or groups.
Okay, we'll just take a couple more questions.
Sure.
Some funders frown upon travels in the interest of CO2 savings. How do you navigate that to practically when it is extremely critical for your travels?
Ooh, good question. Well, you can do it on Zoom now that all during the pandemic. I mean, last time I went to Africa was to do I went through Paris to get to Chad. So I'm sure my CO2 is really, and find ways to, there are ways to combat that. I don't know all the ways to do that, but you look for ways to say, this is the reason I really need to do this. I get that I have to get on a plane, but maybe you're gonna build, maybe you're gonna plant some trees in your community as a way to do that. I had the great fortune to meet Wangari Maathai when she was here in Chicago, and we planted trees with her. So it's really important to think about those things. That's a good question. Not that I have the best answer, but it's a good question.
Okay, what percentage of the budget should you allocate to staff remuneration versus project objectives? Is there a standard ratio or yardstick for measuring this?
Well, I think you're really looking at, in creating a budget, to do the program, do you need 2 staff? You really have to analyze based on the project. If you need staff, you have to put it in. If you need materials and, would this be covered by something else? You have to think about that. Is the rent going to get paid whether or not I have this grant? Will this project get done if I don't have this grant? If this grant is going to keep 2 people to do this work, then you put personnel. Most of the grants are personnel from my observation. Most of my grants, unless I'm going for physical activities like buying blood pressure machines or something like that. Most of it is for individuals for carrying out the program, but you have to analyze what works best for you.
Okay, so the last 2 questions. Aside from monitoring and evaluating projects, can funders go the extra mile of protecting organizations from other power abuse or sabotage?
Ooh. Wow. Well, funders are your partners. So if these things are a problem, you need to talk with the funders and maybe you can come up with a strategy. I have not had that happen to me, but I think you have to be honest, and you need to, if something's happening and if you're being sabotaged on what you're doing and things are not happening, I think you just need to talk with the funders and maybe you come up with a plan.
What may be the problem delaying the remaining percentage of grants money after executing a project, and what can you do to access it?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question again?
What may be the problem delaying the remaining percentage of grants money after executing a project, and what can you do to access it?
So sometimes you didn't put in a report on time. They have questions about your funding right now. Really talking with the program officer and find out why the money's not coming, and just being really honest and saying, we need, this, we count on this as part of our cash flow. Is this something we didn't provide? Is something missing? Is there a reason why? Just finding out the answers.
And to wrap it up, can you kindly reiterate the various sources of grant repositories?
Sources of grants, repeat them. So there's private grants. So those are your big foundations like MacArthur, like Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. You have your family foundations. They might be in name of a person on a specific area that they might want to deal with, eradicating AIDS or dealing with some kind of disease, or just they received a lot of money and they want to give it out in that family's name. You have capital funding. So those are capital, excuse me. You have corporate funding, and that is really corporations either having a grant program or a marketing. Those are 2 different sources of money at corporations. They might have a grant program and they might have a program that just really just deals with marketing. I'm just going back to my, here you go. And then the big one, the federal government grants, state and local government grants. And those are, tied with contracts, with a request for proposals. And you really do need to look at those as sources of grants funding.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Would you want to wrap up?
Sure. I just want to say good luck to you all. You all can write great proposals. I will say the best grant writer who ever worked for me was a reporter. So if you're looking for grant writers, people who write, who are not afraid to write, just write, have clean up, edit, be concise, be persistent. There's no failures here. Sometimes they're just, the competition is bigger. I just want to say, I really appreciate this opportunity for the State Department inviting me back again to do this presentation. And that, for you all, you be the change you want to see in the world. We really need change, and you all are doing it. So I want to thank you from Chicago, where the Democratic National Convention is happening this week. It's all a buzz. This is downtown Chicago, but this is the Buckingham Fountain, named for, Okay, what happened there? I wanted